Hello and welcome to the Deliberate Leaders podcast. I am Katie Carpenter, Executive Health and Wellness Coach here at Deliberate Directions. So today's episode is Scaling Success from Solopreneur to CEO with Nick Shaw's $100 million journey. Nick is the founder and CEO of Renaissance Periodization, a multi-million-dollar company that helps people achieve their health and fitness goals through evidence-based methods. Renaissance Periodization runs the wildly popular RP Diet Coach app and the RP Hypertrophy app. These apps offer personalized diet and training algorithms created by sports scientists, dietitians, and coaches. So with thousands of five-star reviews on Google Play and the App Store, and they have been featured on CNN, Fox News, and NPR. So Nick is an IFBB pro bodybuilder who has bootstrapped Renaissance Periodization from the ground up, rapidly turning it into a health tech brand with a lifetime revenue of $100 million. He has coached Olympians, Navy SEALs, UFC and CrossFit champions, and world record holders. In 2020, Forbes did a feature story on Nick and his one-man business. He has also authored multiple fitness books, including the well-known Fit for Success, Lessons on Achievement and Leading Your Best Life. Welcome to the podcast, Nick.
Wow, thank you so much for the intro. Pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
You bet, you bet. So maybe share a little bit about your backstory, where you began, so to speak.
Yeah, so I grew up in the lovely state of Michigan, born and raised, went to school at the University of Michigan, kind of always a lifelong goal of mine. I'm sort of a Michigan fanatic, especially when it comes to college football,
I
which
know it
luckily
is.
they just won the national championship.
Yeah.
So it was a good year in that regard. But at Michigan is where I met, well, at the time, who's now Dr. Mike, the individual that started RP along with me. We met in the student weight room, and so we both were into fitness. We both got started there, and man, it's just been sort of a magical ride 17 years later.
That's awesome. Oh my gosh. I too also love the weight room and just found a home there when I was very young. So I guess
Awesome.
I want to ask you this question about, if that's the beginning, are there some most critical lessons that you can pick out of your mind where you learned, like what you learned during the early days of sort of bootstrapping RP?
Yeah, if we go back a little bit further, I kind of pinpoint one particular kind of story or lesson that stands out to me, and it was in high school. I was a runner, and I was not a very good runner my freshman year. And so the coach told us, "Hey, you should go run 100 miles over the summer before, cross country starts in the fall." Okay, someone tells me to do something, I'm going to do it. So of course I did. And I went from being, I think, 8 out of 9 my freshman year to the very first practice, I was running with like the top one or two guys the next year. And that to me was like this light bulb moment where I said, oh, wow, this is really interesting, because I was the only one that ran 100 miles essentially over that summer. And I was like, oh, wow, okay, this stands out. Oh, okay, if I just do the things that most people aren't willing to do, well, I can all of a sudden be up there with the best people. And so that was like this really early, because I was probably what, 15 at the time, maybe, let's call it something like that, 14, 15. But I kind of realized early on that the harder I worked, the better results that I would get. And that was sort of my talent. That was sort of my skill, just being a little bit more disciplined than folks. So that to me was like a huge early lesson. And then, graduated from college, went out and was a personal trainer in New York City. And I would say that was another pretty important lesson, because I realized I didn't want to be on my feet, standing, coaching, training people all day long. It's a very hard life to do.
Yeah.
I was in my early 20s and I'm like, oh, this is rough. Like, I can't imagine this 10 years from now. So that to me was another point that stuck out of like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. How can I figure out a way to still be in fitness, but not have to do the in-person part as much? And that's when we started getting into online coaching. And at the time, this was probably 2011, 2012. Online coaching wasn't as big of a thing as it is now. And so like that was pretty cool early on to sort of ride some of those initial waves of social media and more people becoming coaches. So those are probably two big ones that kind of stand out to me.
Okay. Okay. I just heard you talk about, this is what I picked out from that, because that is really important message right there, is like you got super curious about your practice and effort and about why are you so much better. You asked really good questions of yourself and you innovated. Like genius. It was awesome.
Yeah.
So were there any like pivotal failures that occurred in this $100 million journey, and how it sort of shaped your strategy?
Oh yeah. Boy, there's probably like 10,000 of them, but maybe,
Oh, good.
yeah, right. So I think it's one of those things where like once you get going, you just sort of accept that there's going to be some bumps along the way, even though you don't really want them to be, but hopefully the idea is you just learn from them. And I guess like my whole thinking on this has evolved so much over time to now I'm at the point where like so much has happened over the past 10 plus years, where now I just sort of approach it with the mindset of I know something's going to go wrong. I don't really even let it bother me anymore. It's just like, oh, this is the next thing. Oh, I wasn't expecting it to be this, or like I don't even know what the next little bump or hiccup's going to be, but I just have the mindset of I know it's coming. So when it does happen, I'm not going to, let it get myself, too high or too low. It's just like, nope, just kind of remain steady, remain calm. This is just the next thing. What's the most logical way to approach it? But there's just so many little mistakes along the way that it's really hard to pinpoint just a couple, but like we started selling digital products. They were Excel files and it didn't cost us much. We learned a lot from them. And we literally sold Excel files for like a couple of years and like we made good amount of money off of them because they were like digital products that sold for $100. So like the margins were insanely high, but we just got them out into the marketplace, started testing it out, started getting a bunch of feedback from people, and they were like, hey, these are really cool. I can get really good results. I don't have to pay a ton of money for coaching anymore. It was sort of our way to scale that model. And then they're like, yeah, but I don't like this long list of things. We're like, oh, okay, well, we can go back to the drawing board. We can fix or iterate on all of these, come out with a different version, a year later, version 2.0, later 3.0, which later led into us designing the apps. So to me, it's always like there's always been this iterative process along the way where you're always sort of making mistakes and getting feedback. And the end of the goal is, you just want to get better. So
Yeah,
it is what it is.
that's great. That's great. So I had to have a little question because
Mhm.
you went from like solopreneur to CEO, like to having a team, right? And
Yeah.
so how did you manage that transition of like working alone and now you're managing like 50? How many employees do you have? 50?
If we count our coaches, so we've got about 15 or 16 coaches that are 1099s. We've probably got about, well, let's call it anywhere from like 35, 40 people sort of internally now,
Okay.
if we include our coaches in that. Um, that, yeah, I guess you want to talk about failures too. I'd say that's maybe the biggest one because when you start out, we didn't have a big team. It was mostly just myself and, Dr. Mike, the guy that I met at the University of Michigan. He started designing all the stuff behind the scenes, just writing the books and whatnot. But I was kind of in charge of running all the business operations, customer service, etc. My wife helped for a while. So like it wasn't like necessarily just me, maybe for a little bit, but one of the sort of biggest stumbling blocks along the way is for me to switch my mindset of, yeah, I need to be in the weeds. I need to be doing stuff. And that's awesome, right? Because I like doing stuff. I like working
Yeah.
hard, all that. But it's a totally different thing when you get to the point where I'm at now, where I kind of feel like I don't really do much. But at the same time, it's just the things that I do, and I'm making air quotes here, have just shifted. Where now, instead of like me actually going and writing an email or responding to a customer service thing or whatever that is, now we've got people for that. But now I'm to the point where I don't feel like I'm doing anything, but my job is now just are things being relayed accordingly? Like is the kind of the bigger mission and all that, is that being appropriately relayed and communicated to people? Hopefully the answer is yes, but it was really hard for me to wrap my head around that for the longest time. And still today, probably even struggle to kind of wrap my head around that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you speak to the leadership within those employees a little bit? Maybe share that message a little bit.
Yeah, it's still totally evolving. And, I've got a buddy, he was in Navy SEALs and whatnot, and he's been a good friend for a while. And I just texted him not too long ago, and I was like, I feel like I've learned more about leadership in like the last 6 months than I probably did the first 10 years of running RP, because I really was kind of just like trying to figure out like what is my real role as CEO? Like what do I really do? And so a great part of that is, reading tons of books, and being a part of Vistage. So are you familiar with Vistage?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and so like looking at some of the people in my group and the way that they run their organizations, and the cool thing is like, so with RP, we don't have an office. We're all remote, which is pros and cons. But
Yeah,
the people in my Vistas group, I get to go to their offices, I get to go to their facilities, I get to see how they interact with people, and like that was a big turning point for me because I started really paying attention more to that, and working with like our Vistas chair, and we have like a monthly call and all that, but just really kind of nailing down like, oh, this is actually what I should be doing. It's like really just making sure the culture's on point and making sure that we're better about feedback versus just setting on things and not doing anything about it. Like because we were probably guilty of that for a while, but it's like no, 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 no. My job now is to make sure that that's not occurring. So to make sure that the feedback's going both ways because the more feedback we can get, like at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want RP to get better.
yeah,
So let's not view feedback as this like negative thing. Let's view it as something that has to happen. Like it just needs to happen. No one's perfect. So if we can, like, that's where I'm trying to focus more of my energy now. It's like making sure we're hopefully more on that right path and, you know, watching, mimicking other successful people has been great. And then
yes,
also really investing into like reading as much as I could about it and then starting to put some of these pieces together and be like, oh, okay. Oh, this is hopefully how it works. And
yeah,
so that's probably been, I attribute a lot of the success to that.
yeah. The integration of that. I think what you just spoke to is so important, and I don't want it to be underestimated by people and up and coming entrepreneurs is being around people that you want to mimic even, right? Like it's just someone's like look to other successful people and then just observe them and then play with integrating a system, right? And then if it's not working, you adapt that system. It's so smart as a CEO. Like you basically just said, you're working on your relationships, you're working on always being better and helping other people be better and observe who they are, right? And
Yeah.
then
Are you a big sports fan? Because you said you like go to the gym a lot, right? You like a pretty
yes,
big
yes.
sports fan? Okay. So a good analogy, and my buddy, so Dr. Mike, co-founder of RP along with me, you always kind of joke and we watch like the Last Dance documentary with Michael Jordan. I don't know
Mhm.
if you've seen it or not, but
Yeah.
I was a
So
huge
good.
Jordan fan growing up in the Midwest. And like my buddy is Michael Jordan on the team. Like I have no illusions that I'm Michael Jordan. I know that I'm not, but I'm always kind of like, all right, well, what does that make me? Am I Scottie Pippen? I don't know, am I Dennis Rodman? Right? Like I don't know. And he says, oh, oh, this is easy. He's like, you're Phil Jackson. And I was like, oh, that's my role. So recently I just read both of Phil Jackson's books. And man, stuff really started to click because I'm like, I already do a little bit of this. Oh, okay. Now I sort of see what my path needs to be more of. Be more zen, be the calm guy that's not freaking out if stuff goes wrong, which goes back to the whole, just we know stuff's going to go wrong. I don't know what it is, but just being more chill, more relaxed with it. And Phil Jackson has some really great quotes in his books where he says something along the lines of, "The more I tried to assert my control and dominance over the players, the less I got." He's like, when I stepped back and gave them more control and more say, it's like I actually had more influence. And I was like, that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah, and enable trust and like a real
Yes.
relationship for sure. And
Yeah.
you were, I mean, then you're helping your employees, and in turn, he's helping his players trust themselves,
Yeah.
right? And
Mhm.
then people feel safe and to explore who they are and what they're capable of, and you can achieve anything with that. So that's cool.
Totally. Yep. Yep. It's really, yeah, the coaching you sometimes people, need you to maybe be a little stern with them. I'm not saying that happens super often, but other times people just need someone to let them know that like you believe in them and like that they're capable of it. Because I've seen that before, even with my co-founder. I'll be totally down on myself, and he's like, "Dude, what are you doing?" He's like, "I know you can do this."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, that kind of makes me feel better. Like, thanks. Okay. Oh, I can do
Yeah.
it. All right."
Yeah.
So,
We just
yep.
need people to speak to our potential more than anything, right? Is it helps us believe in ourselves.
Yep. And then just kind of being able to tweak your approach to different people because it's not this blanket thing you can just apply to everyone. It's like, well, different people need a little bit, a little bit different something here and there. So yeah,
Yeah, you're a good CEO. I can tell. You're adaptable,
I hope
realizing
so.
that not
I
all
hope so.
people.
Well, I'm very focused on it. I'm very focused on it. I'm like, I really want to be good at it. And so I think like that probably is a big part of it. Like I'm not sitting here saying I've got some big ego or like I don't care. Like I just want the right answer, right? Whoever has it, great. But it's like what can we do to get better?
Yeah.
And some of that it's really hard sometimes because you have to sort of look deep within yourself and be like, what do I need to get better at? And
Yeah.
so I went to some of my colleagues and I was like, please give me feedback. I'm pretty self-aware, I'd like to think, but I was like, what are some other things that I've probably got some blind spots around? Please let me know what they are because I just want to get better. Because I know, like, if we want to keep this thing going and keep growing, like, I need to get a lot better. Because again, like, what I used to do is nowhere near what I do now. And where I think we can get to, I probably need to be even different to get there. So, like, I want that feedback. Like, I just want to get better at the end of the day. That's really it.
Yeah. Constantly seeking that opportunity to grow. I love that. So those are, we were talking about some of the inconsistencies in the way that we have to show up as a CEO because people are different. What is consistent about, I guess maybe did you guys as a company sit down and talk about culture and values and how do you maintain or how did you integrate and then maintain that?
I think it was something that I took for granted where we probably had a culture that like maybe I knew bits and pieces of it, but I definitely took it for granted and was like, well, yeah, we've got a good culture, we've got a fine culture. Didn't realize that we probably had at least one bad apple, and one bad apple can really kind of sour everyone. Lo and behold, that's a very difficult thing to sort of get those people out. And then like once in this particular instance, it was one individual. Once we got this person out, it's like everything sort of changed. And I was like, oh, well, now everyone's really on the same page. And then we kind of got really united, just like, hey, here's going to be our main focus. We're really kind of doubling down on this. This is going to be our, main thing. This is what we want to be best in the world at. Okay, cool. So let's focus more here. We got kind of everyone on board. And it's been really great here the last like we'll call it about a year now because a year ago we launched our second app, the Hypertrophy app, and it's like kind of completely changed our trajectory. Along with this is I will take no credit for this, but our YouTube channel has become massively, just completely blown up to numbers I would never have envisioned we would ever reach, and that's just because my buddy he's got the gift of the gab I like to call it. So he's a very entertaining individual.
That is a gift. I know I did ask my son because he is a weight room junkie. I'm like, okay, have you heard of this guy? And he's like, yeah. So he's seen your guys' YouTube channel.
Yeah, it's wild. It literally is reaching millions of people every single day.
That's so great. I
I
love it.
people from high school like reach out to me and they're like, "Oh my gosh, so and so that I know is like watching all of your stuff," and I'm like,
Yeah,
"That's awesome." So
so
yeah,
great.
it's really cool.
So thank you. Yeah. Um, I do want to jump over to, I want to ask you a question about one of your more successful creations is in your book, Fit for Success, you outline 7 habits of success. What would you say these habits do? Like, what do you believe was the most crucial in your transition from I'm sorry, well, I guess which of the 7 habits
Okay.
was most crucial in the transition of
Totally.
becoming the best CEO that you could be?
Yeah. So it's number 2 in the book, internal locus of control. So this essentially says in like internal locus of control is just kind of a fancier way of saying like you just control what you actually have control over. So external locus of control would be you kind of let outside influences sort of dictate your life. Whereas if you have more of an internal locus of control, you're like, what do I actually have control or say over? This is what I'm going to do. And I mean, you can come up with numerous examples, but there's like a really easy one. If you know you need to drive somewhere and it's raining, well, you can leave late, you can get mad at traffic because people are driving slower in the rain. Well, you don't have any control over that. That's all external. That's probably not the right approach. Like just leave early. You have control over that. Leave 20, 30 minutes early like, if you know it's going to likely take you longer. Worst case, you just get to where you're going a little bit early and you can set and do whatever. So like that's just a really easy way. I have a little bit more of a personal is it okay if I dive into that one? Because I can
Do
this
it.
probably really
Yeah.
drives it home. So in early 2020, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. She's totally fine, by the way, now. Like she's,
Mm,
you know, 99.999% better and
mm,
all that. But she had surgery, she had some complications, she was in the hospital. She ended up having to go into chemo starting in March of 2020. Well, what else happened in March of 2020? COVID hit. So it was just like
Mhm.
this, I don't want to say double whammy. It was really more of like a triple or quadruple whammy all at once because we had two small kids and that they were now being homeschooled. It's like we were just going through all this crazy stuff. And, my wife had this amazing idea because she was going to lose her hair. And she's like, I don't want our kids to see this because they were 8 and 6 at the time, I believe. And she's like, I am not going to let this happen. She's like, you're going to shave my head. And I'm like, okay. Uh,
Okay.
listen, I mean, look at my head. I'm like, okay, I got no issues with it. This is how I always look. But it flipped the script. It went from, external locus of control. You don't have any control over what's going on around you to like all this bad stuff is happening to no, 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 no. Now I have control. I have say. I have agency over when this is going to happen. And it completely changed the outlook because I shaved my son's head and my wife was like, hey, you need to get Emma involved, which is my daughter. She was 6 at the time. We're like, we're not going to shave her head though, but we just did this little strip along the side of her head. So she got to be included. And it fundamentally changed our entire approach to everything that was going on because it was no longer, oh, hey, woe is us, all this bad stuff is happening. It was like, no, 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 we have say, we have control. We're not victims here. And it completely flipped the script and like changed the trajectory. And like that was even a starting point for me of like, this is really powerful stuff. That was sort of the motivation to, all right, well, I'm going to include this in the book and make sure it gets out before 2020 ends because so many people are being impacted by what's going on. Like this is some cool stuff that we can hopefully, get out and share with folks.
Yeah, that is such an important message. Like, what can you control, and how can you sort of employ your own agency and take control of that?
Yeah,
Get ahead of it.
absolutely.
Shave your head. I
There you go.
think that's an inspiring story. That is awesome. And I'm so grateful that your wife is doing awesome. And
So
you guys run this business together, yes?
she worked in, so funny story. We moved from New York down here. She was a COO at a pretty big law firm here in the Carolinas. Realized pretty quickly she didn't want to do that, and this was just at the time where the like kind of hockey stick trajectory of RP was just starting to kind of ramp up. And I'm like, I need all the help I can get. Like, please come help me. So
Yeah.
she worked in the business for probably like like 5, 6, 7 years, something like that. And now she's off doing her own thing in interior design, and she's doing really great in that. So not currently, but she did for a really long time.
Yeah. So family of entrepreneurs. I love that. Well, this has been so fun. I do have a question. Looking back on the whole journey, if there was one piece of advice that you had to give an up and coming entrepreneur who is currently sort of where you started, what would that advice be?
Ooh, yeah, just one. I would say, be okay not knowing everything and going and seeking other sort of experts to come in and help you out. I think sort of intuitively, I always knew that. And if we needed help in a certain area, I was like, I don't know who's good at this. Like, let's just go find someone. Let's just bring them in. And that kind of goes back to, not micromanaging, but like if we're going to hire experts, like let them come in, let them do their thing. We can, help. Hey, here's where we want to go. Here's what we're trying to do, but you're the expert, so you give us feedback now, and then kind of just let them run. I would say that's a big one
Mhm.
because I think a lot of times when you first start, you kind of that like control freak kind of aspect where you want to do
Yeah.
everything, and I totally get it. But if you can kind of step back a little bit from that, you're probably going to be better off because as one person, you can only know so much. And there's going to be a lot of stuff you don't know or you're just not very good at. So bring in other people to help. If it's possible, of course. It depends on finances and all that. But
Yeah. I think that that message, what you just said, is probably one of the most power is though it's the term of like solopreneur, is
yeah,
that no one really does it alone, right? And
totally.
you're giving them that permission of like, no, surround yourself with other experts. That's how you become better.
Yeah, absolutely. And even if it's third party folks, like you don't necessarily have to be part-time, full-time. You can go hire some third party agencies that can help you out, and they're probably going to be pretty good at what they do, and they're going to be a heck of a lot better than you would trying to figure it all out yourself.
Yeah, great. All right, Nick, do you have a number one leadership tip for us aside from what you just said?
Yeah, try to work with other people, try to find, ways to win-win. So the kind of the intro that you gave sort of implied that it was a solopreneurship, or I was doing all this. Well, uh, Dr. Mike and myself have perfect complementary skill sets. He's PhD. He writes everything behind the scenes. He's the content guy. He's the face of the YouTube now. Awesome. That's his gift. Let him go do that.
Yeah.
And so, like, the leadership lesson is, rather than trying to have people do too much, now we've become more clear, is like, okay, these are your strengths. These are the big things you need to do. Try to just focus on those. Like, I'm not
Mm.
going to have him setting on all types of internal meetings where we're going over logistics and all that. One, he'd be bored out of his mind. It's like, no, no, no. Hey, Mike, just go do content and collabs. There you go. You're off and running. Save the other stuff for myself, our COO, and our other third partner, Andrew, who runs all of our kind of tech stack, all of the apps. It's like, we got this. You go
Yeah.
do what you're good at, and that's it. And so it's a really hard thing sometimes to grasp, but that's been a big sort of lesson for myself here the last 3, 6, 9 months.
Gosh, that is such an important message. This whole short but sweet podcast has been such an important message. So I just want to thank you for being a guest. But actually, I just kind of came to mind as like, thank you for so passionately sharing and inspiring health and fitness within others, because it's truly how we take people to the depths of who they are to explore themselves more and becoming more. So thank you.
Totally. Yeah, I love health and fitness, so I can, talk about this stuff all day long. And hopefully, yeah, the passion does come across, because I love it. It's like, when you have a calling, like, you just know it. And fitness has always been mine. So it's just something I can, kind of riff about all day, every day.
That's great. That's great. So where can people find out more about you and all that Renaissance Periodization has to offer?
Yeah, totally. If you wanna have some laughs, just kind of go in knowing it's gonna be
Always.
some humor and gonna make some jokes and whatnot. Just go to YouTube, search in Renaissance Periodization, and trust me, that's hard to spell. So if you just search Dr. Mike, anything kind of health or fitness related, it's probably gonna pop up. That's my colleague, Dr. Mike Israetel. Again, he's very funny. He's not going to be very PC. I always like to sort of preface that before people go in so that the expectation is set. But other than that, myself, at nick.shaw.rp on Instagram. That's usually the spot that I'm on the most.
Okay. Thank you so much, Nick.
Awesome. Thank you.